The Massachusetts Institute of Technology is now the first of 9 universities to reject the adoption of President Trump's political agenda. In a letter written to the Education Secretary, MIT's President Sally Kornbluth said that the university disagreed with the provision of the proposal, which urged the school leaders to pledge to ban the use of race and sex and religion in hiring and admissions, among some other things, for a chance to have preferential access to federal funds and grants. Kornbluth cites that in the provisions, the compact, it would limit the university's values, including freedom of expression and academic freedom, and that the compact, which urged school leaders to ban the use of race and sex and religion in hiring admissions, goes against what they ultimately want to accomplish. And so for more on this, I want to bring back our panel, Elizabeth, Jamel, Kaivan, and Carrie. And Jamel, I'm going to start with you. Did MIT's response surprise you here?
It didn't surprise me, and I thought it was exactly the right tack to take with regards to the administration's compact. I think it's important really to emphasize that what the administration is doing is attempting to replace rule of law here, right? The carrot here is preferential access to the federal funds. But these funds are funds that these universities are already entitled to under existing law, that the administration is already required to provide under existing law. And the administration has no real power other than taking illegal steps, right? Illegal impoundments, no real option but to provide these funds. And so what the administration is doing is saying, we're going to replace the regular order of rule of law with this vague compact whose terms aren't clear. It's not clear what exactly it means, for example, to belittle conservative ideas. That's a phrase in the compact. I think that the proper analogy for this is not some kind of deal between equals, but it's like an invitation to borrow money from the mob. You take the money, and then the university is subject to unpredictable and arbitrary and extreme penalties for any violations that the administration deems that it has committed. So I think MIT is right to do this. I think the other 8 colleges, universities should reject this. I think that if these universities are interested in preserving their academic freedom and not simply being an arm of the White House's political goals, then they absolutely have to reject this.
Well, and Kornbluth argued that scientific funding should be based on merit alone. But Elizabeth, what's interesting here is that these letters weren't just sent soliciting signatures from these 9 schools. They were also soliciting feedback, according to the administration. So what do you make of this outright rejection by MIT?
Well, I'm not surprised by it. I think most of these schools are very, very focused on fighting this administration and fighting Donald Trump, not very focused on making a better environment for their students. I can tell you as a conservative, I can tell you as a Jew, I know what is happening on these college campuses. It has happened to me. It has happened to countless others that I know. My fellow panelists here used the example of taking money from the mob. I think it's giving money to the mob. That's what I would say. I think schools that think that they can take taxpayer dollars, that's funding from the American people, that is a privilege, and then tell those people that they can do whatever it is that they want with it, I think that's pretty mob-like. And I think knowing that there are videos going viral every single day from many of these major universities of conservatives having to walk through campus with security because they're not safe otherwise, Jewish students being locked out of their classrooms. I will gladly send you plenty when we're done with it. Do you want me to send you some after we're done here? You're telling me it hasn't happened?
I'd love to see one of these videos, yeah.
I will send you plenty because I've had friends who were unable to speak at these campuses, who were locked in classrooms as NYPD was being called in New York because of Columbia University. Other police forces were called because campus security couldn't even protect them because their own private paid for security couldn't protect them. There are Jews who are locked outside of their classrooms and not able to attend. There are Jews locked in cafeterias and terrified to walk home. There are Jews being spit on these college campuses. And the fact that you want to fight against my words here because you hate Donald Trump so much and not be ashamed that this is happening to Jews in 2025 in America, that's the real problem.
You said conservatives specifically. So if you can provide evidence that conservatives are walking through universities with private security because they are being attacked by students, I would love to see that evidence, because it seems to me that if that were happening, I would have seen it on programs like this one.
Well,
If
but
you choose
I
not
do
to see it,
want
that's
to
on
hop
you.
in
But
here.
I
I do want to
there are
hop in here.
speakers
Excuse me,
being
just
hired. No. There
guys,
are
just a second.
speakers being hired on the left and the right that have to go into these schools. Speakers from the left do not bring with them security because there are no chairs being thrown at their faces and they're not being spit on. Speakers on the right very often are not even able to speak despite their security because things are so hard for them on
Guys, I'm going to
college
hop in
campuses.
here
You can
because
look it up if
there
you
was a
actually
point that
care.
was made earlier that I do actually want to get back to, because you had mentioned, the intentions of these schools. But Kaivan, I'm going to direct this to you because the University of Texas at Austin said that it was honored to be included and welcomed the opportunity to review the administration's offer. We've heard that from another of these other institutions. And so, I mean, it's not just a broad, it doesn't seem like it's just like a broad notion of a no from these schools.
Well, I think there's partisan incentives there, right, when you cite something like a Texas school. But I will say, I spent 10 years at Brown and Harvard and Yale, and the culture that conservatives describe there simply doesn't exist. And frankly, a lot of these schools, I've been so disappointed to watch my alma maters roll over for Donald Trump. Brown University, Jamel made the point that they have no legal basis to be attacking these schools in this way. Brown rolled over despite that instead of fighting back and wrote a $50 million check. Harvard is expected to also enter a deal with Trump, whereas you had MIT now twice stand up against the right's cancel culture when they first demanded 2 years ago that Kornbluth step down because they didn't like, her political ideology, it seems like, and Harvard caved and UPenn caved. So this is another example of MIT leading on this, and we need other schools to follow because it's not really about left or right. It's about the principle of academic freedom. And for all the talk that the Ivy League puts behind it, it really, this mythology around the Ivy League, I think they consider themselves, a pillar of democracy, and yet we haven't seen that behavior. We haven't seen standing up to this tyranny from the Trump administration. So lots more of this needed.
Carrie, did this move surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. I'm a Harvard graduate, and I personally, as a conservative, have had my viewpoints discriminated against. My colleague, Riley Gaines, with Independent Women's Forum, was locked in a classroom for 3 hours at San Francisco State University because she dared to say that a man should not compete against a woman in a swim meet. And when you actually look at what President Trump was proposing, it's pretty reasonable. He said that students should be treated with equality. He said that administrators should lower the cost of tuition and as much as possible get rid of layers of bureaucracy. He said that students should not be discriminated against by race, gender, or religious background. And I would suspect if we put all 10 of these principles to the voters, they would overwhelmingly agree with them. And so I think what we're seeing here is a huge disconnect between these so-called elite Ivy League universities, of which I'm a graduate, and the average common sense and decency of the American people. And we've got to work together as a country. We've got to start working together instead of being disconnected.
Point made. I would also point out that of these 9 schools, only a subsect are actually Ivy League schools, and we don't know exactly what was part of that 10-point plan that MIT specifically disagreed with. But Elizabeth, Jamel, Kaivan, and Carrie, don't go anywhere, because coming up in our last call, we're going to pivot a little bit. The Las Vegas Aces are on the brink